Hello and welcome to Living Every Moment Nerdy. My name is Joseph, and today we have Holly, Hoops, and Evan, and we're going to talk about who we are, why we're nerds, and what led us to this point, our hobbies, our movies, our TV shows, and some of our cherished memories. And we're going to kick it off with Hoops. Go ahead and give it to us. What makes you a nerd?
So what makes me a nerd? So I think it probably all started back in probably about middle school, whenever Toonami would show up after Cartoon Network. And I think that was the first time I ever got introduced to Dragon Ball Z and Gundam.
Ooh, really good show.
Yeah. Oh, I love those. I still think that they're great. And, you know, Gundam, there's something about giant robots fighting in space that I just thought was amazing. You know, I didn't really have any idea what anime was back then, but I think Gundam is what really made me start venturing out and trying to find new shows to watch. Dragon Ball Z was a little bit more generic along the lines of, okay, it is a fighting anime. It's a show about people fighting, and obviously, I think everyone can attest to watching Dragon Ball Z and you start screaming with the characters on the screen and whatnot. You know, especially when Goku first went Super Saiyan and then Vegeta goes Super Saiyan. I remember Vegeta's first lines were, "Has a machine such as yourself ever experienced fear?" And I had chills, and this was probably about maybe, fourth grade? But after Cartoon Network would come on, that's when Adult Swim would come on if I could stay up. And that's when I got introduced to a show named Yu Yu Hakusho, which was also a fighting anime. And that was the first time I got introduced to tournament arcs, which are still great in use today. So, you know, with anime, it especially back then, you had to be low-key about it. You couldn't just go to school wearing a Dragon Ball Z shirt. Otherwise, you might get made fun of. You know, it's a little bit different nowadays where everyone can wear that stuff. But
oh, for sure. I'm wearing a Dragon Ball Z shirt right now.
Exactly. And, you know, that's how I first started getting introduced into anime. Obviously, with video games, as I was younger, much younger than when I first started getting into anime, you know, I used to have a brother, and he used to just make my life, you know, hell. So what I would do is I would lock myself in my room, and we had video games and whatnot that I could play. So my brother had a PlayStation 2, and I had an Xbox. And this is long after the Super Nintendo and N64, which I barely got to play as a kid, and I hardly remember playing at all, except for Pokemon Snap, which is a great game. Looking forward to the second one. They should probably make that soon. And I would just lock myself up in my room and just play my Xbox. That's how I first got introduced into Halo. And then when my brother was out with his friends, I would sneak into his room and play the PlayStation 2. And that's pretty much how I really started getting deep into video games and whatnot.
Oh, yeah. So I want to hear from Evan. Give us your story. Introduce us. What makes you a nerd?
Well, my story, it goes back a little bit further than that. Some of my original, I guess, nerdy ideas were based off some of my favorite TV shows around the time. As a kid, I would stay up pretty late at night sometimes and watch TV, but I didn't really have cable, so I had Nick at Night, and which was like I Love Lucy and Gilligan's Island and stuff like that. And I remember watching Gilligan's Island as a kid, and them coming up with like all these creative ways to try to get off this island, and I'm like, it was just something always ridiculous. It always got ruined. Like never really got off. But it was the trial and error. It was all these wacky, just crazy inventions that they would come up on the show that just kind of drew me into like a hands-on lifestyle. Like growing up, I would always like take some stuff apart and try and make something else together out of it. Or, I mean, even to this day, I weld and I do like a lot of mechanical things, and I work a lot with my hands because like at the end of the day, that's really just what I want to do. Just build things and create things. That's my whole nerd forte.
And Holly, what about you? What makes you a nerd?
So I would say I had a similar experience with Toonami, except for mine was a little bit different, as I didn't really so much pay attention to a lot of the stuff like on Cartoon Network or Toonami, but the very first, like where I really started noticing, I guess maybe some of my nerdy preferences, was an anime called Inuyasha. And that actually used to come on so late, it was past my bedtime. So what I would have to do is I would actually have to pretend to go to sleep. And then after my whole entire family went to sleep, I would have to go into the living room and sit right up next to the TV and put the volume like on 2 so I could stay up and watch Inuyasha. And I had like a red pair of pants that I thought looked like his. And that was like my first thing where it was like everything was really romantic and all the characters were so cool. And that's where I really started getting into kind of nerd culture. But also too, as a kid, something else that I didn't realize was nerdy, but looking back it is I actually used to take notes in my history class without ever being prompted to, and the material was never going to be tested on. And I actually did that all the way up until like the 6th grade before I realized that other people didn't do that, and I was just really interested in that. So that also kind of stuck out to me a little bit, being different.
I had a similar experience first starting going to college. I take notes on everything, every little piece of detail I can, and I realized I was being a really big nerd that way, and nobody else was doing that. I was like, oh, this isn't going to be tested. I was out of school for so long, you know, I completely forgot, like, how to be a human in school. But how I became a nerd, I think there's different, I guess, species of nerds. You have your history nerds, your movie nerds, your music nerds, and nerds it's kind of almost like a subcategory to who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many things that I could point to that, like, oh, that makes me like the classical sense of a nerd, or that. But if I had to pick one thing, it would be gaming for me. Video games had always been like an impactful part because, like, at the age of 7, I got a little NES, and I played the crap out of it. It was really hard, difficult games, and it became something I was proficient at, and I enjoyed being proficient at it. And I realized that's what kind of being a nerd is kind of about. It's almost like having an obsession in a way. You love something so much with passion, with love, with inspiration and creativity, that you can share that little joy with somebody else, and it's an instant connection. I mean, each of you mentioned like Toonami or a show, and for me, gaming was that connection to everybody else, and everything else kind of formed around that and branched, almost like lightning in the air, hitting different topics randomly, because one thing led to another, and before you know it, you know, I'm sitting at the high school table playing Magic the Gathering, being called King of the Nerds. So that's my story, but I really want to get into everybody's hobbies as a nerd. You know, there's such a vast thing of living every moment nerdy. There's different hobbies that people engage in. Me personally, if I had to pick a hobby that's really nerdy, I like to build Gundam models. And I know, Hoops, you like to build Gundam models.
Oh, yeah,
Why don't you tell us about that?
So I think I started getting into Gundam building with their plastic model kits, and then you put them together, and obviously the end result is a Gundam. And I started getting into that back when I was in elementary school. There's this shop in my hometown called the Hobby Chest. And the first time I went in there, it was because my brother, he used to play with G.I. Joes and whatnot, and he used to collect them, and they would just sit there on a shelf. But when I went in there, I was never really attracted to G.I. Joes and whatnot, but I remember when I got in there, I came across Gundam model kits for the first time. I'd never seen them before, and so obviously I asked my mom if I could get one, thinking that whenever I open up the box, it would be the Gundam itself. But obviously when I opened it up and I see all these plastic model kits, and then I see the instructions, and they're of course in Japanese, but thankfully there are pictures and numbers and letters to identify what parts you got to put together. So I started putting them together and whatnot, and I liked the end result, but you know, obviously looking back on it, you see all these pieces that are hanging off the sides that I didn't know back then you had to clean up and everything, and I was always like, man, why can't these really turn out the way how they look on the box. So after a couple years of doing that, I lost interest in the hobby. More than likely it's because I never went back into the shop, but it was probably over a decade later that I wind up going back into the shop. And, I had a car by then and everything, and I was just going through a tough time with my job where I wasn't sure if they were going to keep me around or not. So I wound up going back into the store just to see, what all had changed. And surprisingly, it looks exactly the same. There's Warhammer 40,000 everywhere. There's car models, G.I. Joes still, and then there were the Gundam model kits. So I go over there to get one of the Gundam model kits, and I buy one, and they're obviously marked up because they're imported from Japan and whatnot. And I wound up taking it back to the room that I was staying in. And I started looking up on YouTube little tricks of the trade on how to make these things really look good. I realized as a kid how I was doing them so wrong. So during that time, probably over the course of a year, I must have put together about probably 12 different model kits and really made them look like how they were supposed to from the box. And it was therapeutic in the sense that when I was building them, I kind of forgot everything that was going on in my personal life, and I could just focus on one thing. So that's when I really got into building model kits. It was kind of an escape away from all the worries of the real world.
Oh, yeah, and I completely understand that because once I started really getting into the Gundam model kit building, it was actually through you and our mutual understandings of like this quiet meditation, and then you came over to my place and we had a day off and we just built a Gundam all day. And honestly, that's probably one of my favorite moments throughout my whole life is that time that we got to just sit there and talk about our shared interest in this Gundam. And like before that, we had been working together and we really haven't talked to each other before that in a very like one-to-one conversation to get to know who is this other person that I've been working with for like 3+ years,
Yep.
So, Evan, what type of hobbies do you like to engage in? What nerdy hobby tickles the brain for you?
It's funny that everyone said Gundam because I also like to build things, but just take out the dumb part. I like guns.
Hey.
So I really realized I was a nerd. As a kid, I would watch one of my favorite shows was Top Shot, and the History Channel especially. I love history. There was a show one time that was listing pretty much every assault rifle that was used in the United States military and their effectiveness. It was about 20 guns through 3 episodes, and I wrote notes and specifications and ammo for each and every single one and put them in a binder and walked around with it forever. People thought I was crazy, but I was just really interested in guns. So now that I'm about my mid to late 20s, I have amassed a collection, I guess you would say, and it's going to probably continue to grow. I have a very strong passion for.
What would you say is your favorite gun?
Oh man, I was going to say there'll be a Canik TP9. They just came recently into the market, but a lot of times you'll hear like the best handgun on the planet is a Glock, and I thought I was a firm believer in that as well until I tried this gun. Came out to be cheaper, it shot better, and it looks better, so can't go wrong.
Yeah, and some people may be intimidated by guns or automatics or pistols or rifles or loud noises or anything in general. And what would you say about ownership of a gun, Evan?
That's my I have I guess a love-hate relationship with most cultures. It's a lot of things that normally require restriction to some degree, but mainly the base of the issue is just education on the matter and the subject itself.
And I would 100% agree with you on that one.
Exactly. I was listening to the radio, I believe, and this woman was making a comment. She goes, I don't really own guns, but I don't think anyone should just be able to walk into a gun store, and buy an automatic weapon. which is not the case. No one has been able to buy an automatic weapon since the 1980s. They've been illegal in the U.S. I mean, if you are legally able to have one, it's tracked to the ATF, and you have to have specific paperwork done. But
for sure,
the number one thing is just that if we could all educate ourselves on the matter, it would be totally different.
And I think that could be said about a lot of things in the world, even gaming in general. I'll be the first one to say that just sitting in home, locked up playing video games, and that's the only source of entertainment that you have, or any type of source of like communication and living your life, that it becomes a very dangerous line between whether or not you're using video games as a source of entertainment or as a crutch to maybe some of bigger issues that you're not really ready to face. And education, everything in moderations, everything. And that's why it's good to have different hobbies, and that's why, Holly, share your hobbies with us.
Okay, so
you like that segue?
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was very smooth.
Very smooth.
I would say probably my number one hobby is watching documentaries, and you guys could even ask Joseph. I've ruined all the algorithms on all of our streaming because all it shows are history and crime and just all these documentaries. And I could watch a documentary about, a crime that happened 30 years ago, and then you can tell me how the grass grows in Africa, and I would be just as totally blown away by that. So maybe I just love to learn, but I love to watch documentaries. And probably another big hobby I have is I love fan fiction, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that, if I'm honest. I read a ton of fan fiction. I don't know why, but I just love it so much. And this wasn't something I did as a teenager. I actually discovered this after the first new Star Wars movie came out. Well, I know, this is so bad. The first one with Kylo Ren. Anyway, that's when I discovered fan fiction, and it has been just quite the journey ever since, let me tell you.
Awesome, man. People's imaginations, sometimes it just amazes me how creative some people can get, though.
Oh,
for sure.
Right? And these are already characters that you love, and now you give brand new adventures that, you don't have to pay any money to see.
Trust me, we'll get around to the topic of copyright and, the rules surrounding it and, freedom of expression and these beloved characters that we know and love, and at a certain point should belong to the community at a certain point after hundreds of years have passed, and whether or not you can keep renewing those copyrights.
Well, I personally don't know any 100-year-old fan fiction, but you do make a really fair point.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot of things probably written about Dracula. I'm sure there is. He's a vampire. It's almost guaranteed.
Right.
There's a lot written about. I can just confirm that for you right now. There's a lot of it out there, and it's all great. You should read it. Vampire fan fiction is the best.
Yeah, there's been a lot of works in the time to develop characters and themes.
Everybody likes vampires. I don't know a single person who doesn't.
That is true. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, you know what, I don't like vampires. I have a strong opinion on the undead.
Right. Anybody who has an opinion about vampires likes them.
That's also true. If you don't like vampires, it's because you secretly are one. You don't want us to believe.
Like them, stop talking all of it. So yeah, those are my hobbies.
Oh yeah, and hobbies, great time to spend or waste time for any moment that you have during the day. But a good time to spend with a friend or yourself is a good movie. And what are your guys' favorite movies? Starting with Holly. We want to hear yours first.
So my favorite movie genre, and I don't know if this is specific enough or too vague, but I like fake history movies. And what I mean specifically by that is stuff like The Mummy, The Da Vinci Code, The Librarian series. All of that.
Yeah.
I love those, and I know that the history is so wrong and so bad that to me, I can watch Indiana Jones all day long. I'm just looking at all this old stuff. It's so cool. But actual movies I like are a lot of fantasy based. I like a lot of sci-fi and kind of weird movies, like Pulp Fiction, that kind of make you think a little bit, but aren't necessarily I don't know if that's a drama or a thriller, but you know what I mean? Where you have to kind of think it through and kind of figure out what's going on, and maybe you have to watch it more than once. Those are my favorite types of movies.
Oh, yes.
What about you, Hoops? What are your favorite types of movies?
So I think I have, movies have a lot of different variety with me. If I had to name off a few, I think obviously up there, I think Forrest Gump has to be up there for me. I've watched that movie plenty of times just because he's a guy that went through so much. Just a little bit. And besides Forrest Gump, a newer movie that I really like is Ready Player One, obviously because it's centered around video games and this whole virtual world. I'm really big into virtual reality. And I'm a sucker for gang movies. So if anyone has, I've seen Blood In, Blood Out at least 100 times. American Gangster over a dozen times. It really is. There's just something about gangs.
Does it have to be gang focused, like the main characters has got to be a part of the gang, or could it be about like officers breaking up gangs? Is it like just have to have a gang in it? Like
no, it's got to focus. They got to be in the gang. Something about them being in the gang really makes me interested in it. In movies that they got to have a good villain. So one of my most favorite movies is a movie called No Country for Old Men. The villain in it, his name is Segura. And that is one of the best performances I've ever seen by an actor before, is the betrayal of Segura in that movie. There's a scene where he talks to a cashier in the middle of nowhere at a gas station, and that was the first time, I think, in my life I'd ever been blown away by the performance of an actor.
Oh, for sure. I hear I got great reviews. I don't know if anybody won any awards or anything, but that was a movie that kind of came out of nowhere.
It really did.
It was here, it was raved about, and then it kind of just disappeared into the ether.
Oh, yeah, it came out when I was in about, I want to say a freshman or 8th grade, and I remember watching it.
That was 2007. I just Googled it.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. Quite a bit. I felt like that was like 2012 or something.
Yeah, I did too. In 8th grade when that happened.
Man, what about you, Evan?
All right, so here's my take on movies, because if it wasn't guns being my number one passion, it would probably be movies. That's my close second. I don't really like the Marvel, DC whole superhero thing. Kill me now, shame me if you will, but so what?
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, as a child, I want to say from as early as I remember, I never really had cable. I never really watched TV. It was always VHSs or DVDs and stuff like that. So I took one class in school called media literacy one time, and it just changed my life. I began to analyze every movie that I had ever watched to see if the story writing was there, the character development was there, the reaction, like the bonding between the characters. Is it forced? Does it feel like I'm watching a movie, or am I actually lost in there? So a lot of my favorite movies are by a lot of actors who've been acting for a very long time, who have a vast different, like Robert De Niro. If I see Joe Pesci or Al Pacino in a movie, everybody better get away from me now, and I'm cutting off the lights, and I'll see you in like 3 hours because I got to watch it twice. Except The Irishman, I need about 5 hours because it's 2.5 hours long. But those kind of movies right there where I can, like, it's got to be a crime genre or like maybe a science fiction type deal. But a lot of the times it could be something as simple as a mystery or crime, just something that can get me captivated. It can make me really believe in this world that I live in, that I could encounter that situation. Then I really believe it's good story writing. And that's what really gets me in the movies.
And this is something I can really relate to, especially when you said you analyzed everything, because I would say I had a similar experience. Wasn't rich growing up, didn't have cable TV when I was real young. A lot of our things was, going to, maybe a pawn shop or something here and buying an old VHS and watching that. And through that, I ended up watching movies like Ghostbusters, the original Freddy Krueger, the original Halloween. Mostly at ages I probably shouldn't have been watching them, but still, it built this knowledge of like cinematography. Is the angle right? What did you use with this time? Did you just slap a scenery and a song behind it, or did you take a time to create something for the story? Does it add something? And when I feel like a movie is really wasting my time with like different little bits that aren't like really necessary, or it feels like they're trying to overstuff a movie, it almost becomes painful to watch. And that could be said a lot about Marvel, where they kind of like, I get why they did it. They kind of just stuffed as much as they could, and they tried to mix, and it was definitely something that was very hard to achieve. It's only been done once in media, in cinematography. But there's something to say about those movies like Heat, like American Gangster, like those movies that really compel you to watch this character, and whenever he runs to the cliff and he stops real quick and he looks over the edge and he like gasps for air, that you in that seat are also gasping for that air. So the movies that get me are the ones that could like I can disappear from. A perfect movie I would do is a Speed Runner. It's a not Speed Runner, Speed Racer.
Okay.
It's a movie where it's very colorful. It's about family, and it's a child movie over an old cartoon. But if you watch that, like each character is developed. Every character has their own things of saying what they want to say. Every character has rules to them, you know, and values and principles. In some movies today, it's like, you know, it's like I stand for good, and all of a sudden they're making an evil decision because the littlest of pressure was placed on them. And it's like, what type of person breaks under that little of pressure? Like, how does this strong character instantly snaps or switches sides or turns good or turns bad? It doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like it's been worked for, and it feels like it's kind of cheap. And like sometimes those movies are fun, but sometimes those movies seem like a big waste of time. And off of movies, I just want to talk a little bit about LEMN. What does it mean? What does living every moment nerdy mean? And we've listened to everybody a little bit. This is going to be the regular task for our podcast. We'll have other people come in, friends, families, wives, loved ones, just to give them their own perspective. Because being a nerd isn't just about playing video games, loving history or science, or being obsessed about stuff. It's also about being in the community, you know, where there has been no community before. And now during a time where we accept people's hobbies and the things that make them truly unique, especially in a time like this, that we can all come together and enjoy things in every moment, each uniquely, and create an area in a community where we can interact, be happy, to enjoy each other, to conversate, to understand each other, maybe to teach, maybe to learn. Because being a nerd doesn't mean just liking nerdy things. It means being able to accept other people. There was a time where being a nerd meant that you would get kicked down, spit in the face, bullied, or any of these things. And that time has changed, and it kind of shows how society has grown. But I think it's clear to say that society, you know, still has a lot to grow up to. But in the meantime, you know, why not create a culture that accepts and tries to live to some meaning? It doesn't have to be, you know, deep. It doesn't have to be thoughtful. It could just be something to work towards, something to enjoy, something to share with others and bring you together. And I'd like to hear everybody else's feelings about where they want this channel to go, what they want to get from it, what it means to them. I want to start with Evan. Go ahead and tell me what this means.
What I really hope for, but I mean, this is wishful thinking. But a lot of times when I've always been told by my dad to never really follow like any group of people. He's always like, man, you're a leader. Don't follow anybody. Don't follow yourself into a group of people. And it's for very good reason, because a lot of times if I try to associate myself with like, we're the so-and-sos, all of a sudden, whatever group that I associate myself with, we're now talking down upon anybody who doesn't do the same activities as us. That's the one thing I do appreciate nerd culture more than anything, is that they can appreciate that different people have different lifestyles and that we all have different things that we can contribute to a society as a whole. Like,
amen. Preach it.
There's people who I was in like a weightlifting group, and they're like, oh, look at those scrawny dudes. You think they do this? You think they do that? I'm like, but these are talented individuals. Like, one man is a welder, not with 25 years of experience. What does you lifting weights, you know, how does that compare with this man's lifelong skill for actually building things that we rely on for our basic needs for life. So if I could surround myself or our podcast with a bunch of like-minded individuals who could just appreciate that we all have different lifestyles and just being nerdy is one of them, because we're all nerdy to some degree. You could be a total jock or however you want to say it, but if somebody brings up your favorite TV show, all of a sudden you know all the statistics and every character on there. Yeah, buddy, that makes you a nerd.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, let me be the first to say it. It is a common misconception that jocks and nerds are so far apart. If you look at, you can take football, hockey, baseball, basketball, soccer, or whatever, and you take a nerd that plays RPGs constantly, like WoW and stuff, and you ask them, hey, what group has the greatest magic defense? They might say something like this: what armor has the greatest fit? What type of thing? Where can you get that? And then you ask a jock, who's your favorite team? Who's the best passer ever on that team? Who's the best kicker ever on that team? And all of a sudden you begin to see the similarities when people start saying out stats and numbers. It's like, oh, this gives you plus 15 magic defense and you don't take damage from this, or, oh, this team has a great lineman. This dude has this many tackles and this many, like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Glad you said it. I'm so glad that you said that, because I had never understood fantasy football, and all these people don't even understand, simple ballistics, but we can't even, cross between the two. I can get you to understand ballistics if you can get me to understand how that I can't get one full fantasy team full of all-star players. If this is fantasy football, I don't understand.
And I hear you on that, 100%. Holly, what does this being a nerd mean to you?
Well,
what does lemon mean to you?
What does lemon mean to me? I've always felt like I've never been really a part of a community. Like, I've always been on the fringes of a community, like where I kind of fit in, but I don't quite fit in. And especially as a teenager and in middle school, I really felt that a lot. And I still kind of feel like that in my adult life. A lot of the people I see in my job are, a lot older than I am, and I feel like maybe we don't have a lot of the same interests, although they could be nerds about whatever the specifics of their lives are. So I'm hoping from this channel and from this podcast to kind of like create a community instead of trying to go and find one. It's like building one up around myself of, like Evan said, of mutual understanding, and we all are really weird about our specific interests, but that's okay because we all know that somebody may be a nerd about guns and somebody may be a nerd about Gundams, or whatever your specific interest is, that you're allowed to be, who you really are here in this community that we're kind of creating by doing this channel. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Oh, yeah, just today you met with a friend who heard that we were creating a podcast and that we were going to be talking about nerdy things, and they were all for it, and they wanted to join, and you asked them, what do you want to talk about? I got to let Joseph know what you want to talk about so he can plan things out. And she was like, I really know a lot about EDM and that type of scene and that music, and, that's what being a nerd's about. It doesn't necessarily just mean, you're divided in anything. It's that you care about the things you have interest in.
Right.
And with that, what does lemon mean to you?
So I think what this channel means to me is it's a place where people can come and listen to, like-minded individuals, and we can hear people that are nerdy about other different things. And I'm real excited to hear about that. Obviously I am a huge nerd for video games. And anime as well. Those two things are probably my number 2 and number 3, but the number 1 spot probably being if you want to talk about mixed martial arts and the UFC and all other fighting organizations out there, boxing, kickboxing, I probably know a lot more about that than anything else. It's honestly, I've lost a lot of lifetime to that one specific subject right there. So I want to be able to, we all have a shared interest in video games and anime and nerd culture and everything, and just being able to come together and just talk about it, and just record it, pretty much our everyday conversations with one another. And the only thing different about it is that we're just recording it, so I'm real excited to see where it goes and excited to hear from other people, about similar things that we have in common, things that we don't have in common. So I'm excited about just hearing from other people and just being able to come together and find out what everyone's deal is pretty much.
Oh, for sure. And that leads me, to the closing statement, to be honest, and this is more directed to the listeners, is if you have something that you're passionate about, that you love to talk about, you'd love for us to talk about or even explore, is it something new? Is it something old? We'd love to hear it. And as we continue with this, we don't expect this to be something that's totally big or to be famous about this. This is truly about creating a community of people. I know there's been multiple times in my life where I've wondered, what good can I add to the world? And sometimes, you do something and you hope that it will be the good that you want to add to the world, or you feel like it might not be enough. And sometimes you feel like there's a certain way you feel you can add something better, something happy. And what I would say about that is, that's what we want to do here, is just find a place to create happiness for people, a place for people to hang out, that people can talk about things and learn new things, enjoy new things, and really start a community. We're in 2020, we got to find a way of developing online communities, managing them, and looking into the future and seeing what we want to do. And if that's making a new friend and making someone smile for tomorrow, that's the least we can do. It's bare minimum, but it's something. What about you guys? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're all right. We all kind of said the same thing about wanting to create a community and just find out what people, what's your weird thing that you like. I love learning about all the weird things that other people, not even weird things, but specific things that other people like. And if even just one person would tell us what they were interested in, I would consider it a benefit to us.
100%. And we're going to close that out. Thank you for joining with us today. If you want to comment, subscribe, stay with us, hear what we have to say, and join us next week when we talk about, some of our favorite TV shows and some of our favorite movies between our younger selves, our older selves, and how we've matured as nerds. And that's just living every moment nerdy. See you guys later.